There is a profound tension in how we are taught to find true meaning in our modern lives. Today, society pulls us in two opposite directions. On one side, we have a culture obsessed with inflating the ego, building a personal brand, and constantly elevating the self. On the other, we have religious traditions that have often been hollowed out into mechanical, physical rituals, leaving the deeper internal meaning behind. To resolve this spiritual crisis, we must look at four titans of Islamic thought. First, Molana Rumi, the rebel Bulleh Shah, Shah Abdul Latif Bhai, and the philosopher Allama Iqbal. The classical mystics, Rumi, Bulleh Shah, and Bhai, built their philosophy on a very clear foundation. They taught that to reach the divine, you must completely annihilate the self. You have to destroy your ego. As Iqbal's face comes into focus. Then, in the 20th century, we get Allama Iqbal, a philosopher and poet who explicitly claimed Rumi as his spiritual master. Yet, Iqbal built his entire intellectual framework on Khudi, the radical empowerment, assertion, and deliberate elevation of the self. The spiritual master demands ego death. The student demands ego elevation. Between these two opposing forces lies a precise path for how the individual functions in the world. In the 18th century Indian subcontinent, poets like Bulleh Shah and Shah Abdul Latif Bhai waged a fierce rebellion against the religious establishment of their time. They were not attacking faith, they were attacking the arrogance of the false ego, the kind of ego that used empty, outward routines to mask a lack of genuine piety. Bulleh Shah specifically rejected the deep social divisions and sectarianism fracturing his society, pushing instead for a universal, inward humanism. Shah Abdul Latif Bhai pushed this further by focusing heavily on Kaksari, which is a deep, radical humility. Bhai saw worldly suffering as a purifying force. He argued that absolute detachment from material desires was the only way to reach the divine. For these classical mystics, destroying the ego meant stripping away worldly arrogance, social status, and superficial divisions to reveal a pure, inward truth. The mechanism they used to achieve this state comes directly from Molana Rumi. The tool for this ego death is Ishq, or divine love. Rumi argued that a soul cannot experience the divine light, what he called the everlasting wine, without first actively removing the pride and the ego from the equation. It is a state of total selflessness, where the lover sheds their individual identity and merges completely with the beloved. Classical mysticism effectively provided the method to empty the human vessel of its toxic worldly attachments. 200 years later, Allama Iqbal looked at the political and spiritual decline of the modern Muslim world and made a critical observation. He diagnosed that the masses had misunderstood this classical concept of ego death. People were using the idea of selflessness as a justification for passivity and worldly inaction. Iqbal's solution was Khudi, the indestructible divine spark revealed after the false ego is burned away. This inner core transforms the individual from a passive observer into an empowered agent shaping reality. These individuals integrate into the Ummah, forming a network strong enough to reconstruct society. Iqbal did not contradict his spiritual masters. He provided the necessary next step, taking the heart they had purified and turning it into an engine for real-world action. The teachings of Rumi, Bulleh Shah, Bhai, and Iqbal form a rigorous, sequential process. First, you use the classical mystics' teachings to destroy the false self that obsesses over social status, sectarianism, and hollow rituals. Then, you apply Iqbal's framework to awaken the true self, acting as an empowered co-creator of destiny alongside God. The classical mystics teach the human soul how to empty the cup. Allama Iqbal teaches the soul what to fill it with. Spirituality begins by letting the self dissolve into the darkness, but it ends with the individual emerging as a source of light. In Iqbal's view, you find peace by losing yourself, but you find your purpose by becoming the light. Which stage of this transition are you facing right now? Are you still emptying the cup, or are you ready to fill it?